My dad gave me disownment papers for my birthday until the CEO called my name. My name is Anfisa, and this is how my father handed me my death certificate on the day I turned 25, only to watch me rise from the ashes 6 months later and burn his empire to the ground with nothing but the truth. The conference room was silent, except for the sound of my father's pen scratching across paper. 20 people sat around that mahogany table, board members, lawyers, investors, all watching as Gregory Volkov, my own father, slid a manila envelope across the polished surface toward me. It stopped just inches from my hands, which were trembling despite my best efforts to appear calm. "Happy birthday, Anfisa," he said, his voice flat and cold. "Consider this your gift." Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most? Let me back up, because this story doesn't start in that boardroom. It starts 25 years earlier, in a small apartment in Moscow, where my mother rocked me to sleep while my father worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. Back then, Gregory Volkov was nobody. Just another immigrant with big dreams and calloused hands. My mother, Irina, was a music teacher with a voice like honey and a heart too generous for this world. My father built Volkov Industries from nothing, literally nothing. He started with a single construction contract, worked himself bloody, saved every ruble, and reinvested everything. By the time I was 10, we'd moved from that cramped apartment to a house with actual rooms for each of us. By 15, we lived in a mansion. My father's company had expanded into real estate development, and he'd become one of the wealthiest men in Moscow. But success changed him. The man who used to carry me on his shoulders became distant, always working, always chasing the next deal. My mother tried to hold our family together, but the cracks were already forming. When I was 17, she died in a car accident, a drunk driver on a rainy night. I held her hand in the hospital as she took her last breath, and my father didn't arrive until 2 hours later. He'd been in a business meeting. After that, something inside him died too. Or maybe it just revealed what had been growing there all along. A cold, calculating machine that valued power and money above everything else. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make her proud, to honor her memory by becoming someone she could admire. I graduated top of my class, got my MBA from Moscow State University, and joined Volkov Industries as a junior analyst. I thought I was joining the family business. I thought I was coming home. Instead, I walked into a viper's nest. My father had remarried within a year of my mother's death. A woman named Svetlana, 15 years younger than him, with ice blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. She brought her son, Dmitri, into our lives. He was 2 years older than me, charming in public, cruel in private. Within months, Svetlana had redecorated every room in our house, erasing every trace of my mother. The photos came down. The piano she used to play was sold. Even her garden was torn up and replaced with geometric hedges. I said nothing. I swallowed my grief and focused on work. I poured everything into Volkov Industries, working 16-hour days, taking on projects nobody else wanted, proving my worth with every quarterly report. I uncovered cost overruns in our Prague development. I restructured our supply chain and saved the company millions. I negotiated a partnership with a German firm that opened entire new markets. And my father gave all the credit to Dmitri. Every success I achieved, every innovation I brought to the table was presented to the board with Dimitri's name attached. My stepbrother, who spent his days playing golf with clients and his nights in expensive clubs, was being groomed as the heir to Volkov Industries. Meanwhile, I was kept in the shadows, my contributions acknowledged in private, but never in public. "You need to understand something, Anfisa," my father told me once, when I finally worked up the courage to confront him. "A woman can be competent, even brilliant, but the business world is not kind to women at the top. Dmitri has the presence, the authority that clients expect. He's the face of this company's future." "And what am I?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're valuable," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Behind the scenes. That's where you do your best work." I should have left then, but I was trapped by love, by loyalty, by the desperate hope that my father would one day see me the way he used to when I was small. So I stayed. I continued to build his empire while being paid a fraction of what Dmitri earned. I attended board meetings where my ideas were dismissed until Dmitri repeated them 5 minutes later. I smiled at company events while Svetlana introduced her son as Gregory's right hand and introduced me as Gregory's daughter from his first marriage, as if my mother was some distant historical footnote. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. I'd been working for 3 months on the biggest deal in company history, a joint venture with a Chinese conglomerate to develop luxury residential towers in Shanghai. The contract was worth $800 million. I'd learned Mandarin, built relationships with the Chinese partners, navigated complex regulations, and structured a deal that would triple our international footprint. The signing ceremony was scheduled for my birthday, March 15th. I arrived at the office that morning to find my security badge deactivated. The receptionist, who'd known me for 5 years, wouldn't meet my eyes as she called upstairs. 20 minutes later, my father's assistant, not my father himself, came down to escort me to the executive floor. Something was wrong. The looks I received as I walked through the hallways were a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. The conference room was full when I entered. The Chinese delegation sat on one side of the table looking confused. Our board members lined the other side, faces carefully neutral. At the head of the table sat my father, with Svetlana and Dmitri flanking him like gargoyles. "Sit down, Anfisa," my father said, gesturing to an isolated chair at the far end of the table. I sat, my heart pounding. Something was very, very wrong. My father began speaking in Russian, then switched to English for the benefit of our Chinese partners. "We're here today to formalize not only our partnership with the Chen Group, but also to address some internal matters at Volkov Industries." He paused, his eyes finally meeting mine. "Anfisa, over the past several months, some concerning irregularities have come to light regarding your conduct within the company." The room started spinning. "What are you talking about?" Dmitri leaned forward, his face arranged in an expression of false sympathy. "We've discovered that you've been accepting kickbacks from contractors, falsifying expense reports, using company resources for personal gain." "That's a lie." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's an absolute lie, and you know it. Please, Anfisa, don't make this harder than it needs to be." My father's voice was so calm, so reasonable, it made me want to scream. "We have documentation, email trails, bank records showing deposits into your accounts." "Forged," I said, my voice shaking. "All of it. You framed me." Svetlana spoke up, her voice dripping with false concern. "Darling, we understand you've been under a lot of stress. Perhaps you didn't realize what you were doing." "Don't you dare," I hissed. "Don't you dare pretend this is anything other than what it is." My father slid the manila envelope across the table. "This contains your termination paperwork, a cease and desist letter prohibiting you from contacting any Volkov Industries clients or partners, and legal documentation removing you from any claim to company assets or inheritance." He paused. "Happy birthday, Anfisa. Consider this your gift." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked around the table, searching for one friendly face, one person who would stand up for me. The board members looked away. The Chinese delegation watched with detached curiosity, as if this was merely an interesting cultural spectacle. And my father, the man who'd once told me I could be anything I wanted, stared at me with the cold assessment of a CEO cutting loose a problematic employee. "You're disowning me," I said quietly. "On my birthday, in front of all these people." "I'm protecting my company from liability," he replied. "You brought this on yourself, Anfisa. I gave you every opportunity." "You gave me nothing." The words exploded out of me. I built this company as much as you did. Every success you've celebrated in the past 5 years, I was behind it. The Prague project, the German partnership, this entire Shanghai deal, all me. And you're going to give it all to him? I pointed at Dmitri, who had the audacity to look offended. Your talentless stepson who couldn't close a lemonade stand deal without a script? That's enough, my father said, his voice hard as granite. Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to clear your desk. Any company property not returned will result in criminal charges. I looked at him for a long moment, memorizing every line on his face, every cold calculation in his eyes. This man was a stranger. Perhaps he always had been, and I'd been too desperate for his love to see it. You're making a mistake, I said quietly. The only mistake I made, he replied, was trusting you with responsibilities you couldn't handle. 2 security guards appeared at the door. I picked up the envelope, might as well see exactly how thoroughly they destroyed me, and walked out with my head high. I didn't cry, not then, not in front of them. I cried later, in my car in the parking garage, watching through blurred vision as they celebrated inside without me. Through the glass walls of the executive floor, I could see champagne being poured. My father was shaking hands with the Chinese delegation. Dmitri was laughing, probably already taking credit for my work. And Svetlana was holding court, the picture of a proud mother. They'd planned this, every detail, every piece of false evidence, every witness who would corroborate their lies. They'd waited until the Shanghai deal was done, until my usefulness had been extracted, and then they disposed of me like garbage, clean, efficient, brutal. I drove home, to the apartment I'd rented 3 years ago, never fully comfortable in my father's mansion with Svetlana's redecorating, and sat in silence for hours. Then I opened the envelope. The termination papers were thorough. They accused me of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The supporting documentation was expertly forged. Emails I'd never sent, contracts with signatures that looked like mine but weren't, bank statements showing deposits I'd never received. They'd even created a fake offshore account in my name. The legal papers didn't just fire me, they painted me as a criminal. But there was one thing they'd miscalculated. One tiny detail they'd overlooked in their rush to destroy me. I wasn't just my mother's daughter. I had her gentleness, yes, her music and her kindness. But I also had my father's intelligence, his strategic mind, his absolutely ruthless ability to see 3 moves ahead on the chessboard. They taught me everything I needed to destroy them. They just didn't realize it yet. I spent that night going through every file I'd ever created, every project I'd touched, every email I'd sent. I'd been careful over the years, meticulously documenting my work, keeping backup copies of everything. Not because I'd anticipated betrayal, though perhaps some part of me had, but because I was thorough. It's who I was. And as I reviewed 5 years of my life at Volkov Industries, I began to see the pattern, the discrepancies, the irregularities that I'd noticed, but never quite pursued because they seemed small, because I was too busy proving myself, because I trusted my father to handle the details while I handled the vision. Dmitri hadn't just stolen credit for my work, he'd been actively embezzling from the company. The very crimes they'd accused me of, he'd been committing for years. Hundreds of small transactions, shell companies, inflated contractor invoices, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. He'd been siphoning millions from Volkov Industries, and my father had either been too blind to see it or too willing to overlook it because Dmitri was Svetlana's son. I had evidence, real evidence, not the fabricated garbage they'd used against me. Bank records, contract comparisons, email chains with timestamps and metadata that couldn't be faked. Dmitri had been sloppy because he'd never expected anyone to look, never thought he'd need to cover his tracks carefully. The question was, what to do with it? I could go to the authorities, but my father had connections throughout Moscow. The police, the prosecutors, the judges. He'd contributed to their campaigns, attended their charity events, played golf at their clubs. They'd buried any investigation before it started, and I'd look like a disgraced employee trying to take revenge with false accusations. I could go public, but the media loved my father. The self-made billionaire, the rags to riches story, the philanthropist who donated to children's hospitals and arts programs. They'd crucify me as the ungrateful daughter attacking her father's legacy. I could leak the information anonymously, but that wouldn't give me what I needed: vindication, justice, the chance to look my father in the eyes and show him exactly what he'd thrown away. So I did something else, something my mother would have done. I told the truth, but I told it to someone who would listen. Chen Wei was the CEO of the Chinese conglomerate we'd partnered with on the Shanghai deal. I'd spent 3 months building a relationship with him, learning about his business philosophy, his vision for the future of luxury development in Asia. He was in his 60s, a self-made man like my father had once been, but he'd never lost the values that had driven him: honor, integrity, the belief that business was built on trust. I'd seen how uncomfortable he'd looked during my public humiliation in the conference room, how he'd asked his translator several times if he was understanding correctly, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. I called his assistant at 4 in the morning, mid-afternoon in Shanghai, and asked for 5 minutes of his time. To my surprise, she put me through. "Miss Volkov," Chen Wei said in accented but clear English, "I hoped you would call. You did? What I witnessed yesterday troubled me greatly. In my country, we have a saying: the tiger who eats his own cubs will soon go hungry. Your father's actions seemed unwise." I took a breath. This was it, the moment where I either saved myself or destroyed whatever credibility I had left. "Mr. Chen, I would like to send you some documents, evidence that the accusations against me were fabricated, and that the real financial improprieties at Volkov Industries have been committed by my stepbrother, who my father is positioning as his successor." There was a long pause. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know who you're really partnering with. Because in 3 months, Dmitry will be signing contracts on behalf of Volkov Industries, and he's been systematically stealing from the company for years. Because you value integrity, and I think you deserve to work with people who share that value." Another pause. "Send me everything you have. I will review it personally." "Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. My father is a powerful man. If you pursue this, he will fight back. He will try to bury this investigation, and he might try to bury you with it." "Miss Volkov," Chen Wei said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "I did not build a billion-dollar company by being afraid of powerful men. Send me the evidence. If it is as you say, I will know what to do with it." I sent him everything, every document, every email, every spreadsheet highlighting the discrepancies. I included my own work product, time-stamped and metadata verified, showing that I had been the primary architect of the Shanghai deal. I even included security footage I'd obtained, because I'd learned from my father to always have insurance, showing Dmitry in meetings where he'd simply regurgitated my analysis word for word. Then I waited, and while I waited, I rebuilt my life. I moved out of my apartment, too many memories, and found a smaller place across town. I reached out to former colleagues who'd left Volkov Industries over the years, people I'd worked with who'd been pushed out or sidelined. I discovered I wasn't the first person my father had discarded. There was a whole community of talented people he'd used and thrown away, and they remembered me. They remembered that I'd been different, kind, fair, honest. One of them, a brilliant analyst named Katerina, was now working for a startup focused on sustainable real estate development. They were small but growing, and they needed someone with international experience. "We can't pay you what Volkov Industries did," she said apologetically. "I don't care about the money," I replied. And I meant it. I care about building something real. They hired me as a senior consultant. The work was challenging, the resources limited, But for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something meaningful. We were developing affordable housing with green technology, creating communities rather than just buildings. It was everything my mother would have loved. 6 weeks after my firing, Chen Wei called me. Miss Volkov, I have completed my review of the materials you provided. My heart stopped. And? They are comprehensive, disturbing, and unfortunately for your father, completely verifiable. He paused. Miss Volkov, my company has zero tolerance for financial impropriety. We have terminated our partnership with Volkov Industries, effective immediately. We are also pursuing legal action to recover all funds already transferred, plus damages for fraudulent misrepresentation. You believe me, I whispered. I believe the evidence. You simply provided it. His voice softened. But yes, I also believe you. I have daughters your age, Miss Volkov. I would be proud if they had half your courage. The next day, the business press exploded. Chen Group's withdrawal from the Shanghai deal erased $800 million from Volkov Industries' projected revenue. Stock prices plummeted. Within 48 hours, 3 other international partners had suspended their agreements pending investigation. The financial authorities opened a formal inquiry into the company's accounting practices. My father held a press conference, standing at a podium with Dmitri beside him, proclaiming his innocence and suggesting that this was a coordinated attack by jealous competitors. He looked older than I remembered, stress carving new lines into his face. But Chen Wei wasn't finished. He'd sent copies of my documentation to other business leaders in our industry, people who valued integrity, who'd been burned by corruption before, who had the power to demand accountability. The scandal wasn't just about one company anymore. It was about an industry-wide reckoning. 2 weeks later, the dam broke completely. A whistleblower from within Volkov Industries, someone I'd never met, someone who'd been watching and gathering their own evidence, came forward with additional proof of Dmitri's embezzlement. The authorities raided the company offices. They seized computers, files, financial records, and in those records, they found something I hadn't known about, evidence that my father had known about Dmitri's theft all along, that he'd helped cover it up, that the fabricated evidence against me had been his idea, a way to remove the only person in the company who might have discovered what was happening. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd been complicit in the crimes he'd accused me of committing. The trial took 6 months. I watched from the public gallery as prosecutors laid out the evidence piece by piece: Swiss bank accounts, shell companies in the Cayman Islands, forged contracts, and falsified invoices. The same accusations they'd leveled at me, but this time backed by mountains of irrefutable proof. Dmitri folded first. He took a plea deal, testifying against my father in exchange for a reduced sentence. Svetlana fled to Monaco, taking whatever assets she could liquidate before they were frozen. And my father, the great Gregory Volkov, the self-made billionaire, the man who'd built an empire from nothing, sat in the defendant's chair and watched his world collapse. The prosecution called me as a witness. I walked into that courtroom wearing my mother's pearl necklace, the only piece of her jewelry Svetlana hadn't managed to sell, and told my story. Not with anger, not with tears, but with calm, factual precision. Every detail, every document, every moment of betrayal. My father's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter seeking revenge, but the evidence spoke louder than his objections. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. I wasn't there for the sentencing. I'd said everything I needed to say, and I had no desire to watch my father be led away in handcuffs. But I heard about it later. 12 years in a federal prison, plus restitution of all stolen funds and damages. Volkov Industries was dissolved, its assets sold to pay creditors and victims. The mansion was auctioned. The legacy was erased. 3 months after the trial ended, I received an unexpected call. Chen Wei wanted to meet with me in Moscow. We had coffee at a small cafe near the university where I'd gotten my MBA, a lifetime ago it seemed. I have a proposition for you, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Chen Group is expanding our European operations. We need someone who understands both the market and the importance of integrity. Someone who has proven they will choose what's right over what's easy. I opened the folder. Inside was a contract offering me the position of Director of European Development, with a salary that took my breath away, and a benefits package that included equity in the company. I don't understand, I said. After everything, you did the right thing, Chen Wei interrupted gently. You risked your career, your reputation, your relationship with your father, not for revenge, but for truth. That is exactly the kind of person I want building my company's future. I looked at the contract, at the opportunity being offered to me, a chance to start over, to build something real, to honor my mother's memory by being the person she'd raised me to be. There's one condition, I said. Chen Wei raised an eyebrow. Oh? 10% of my salary goes to a foundation I'm starting, for young women in business who've been pushed out or pushed down by people who should have mentored them. Scholarships, legal aid, career counseling. So, what happened to me never has to happen to anyone else. Chen Wei smiled. I think we can accommodate that condition. I signed the contract that afternoon. That was 18 months ago. Today, I oversee 12 major development projects across 6 countries. The foundation has helped 43 women rebuild their careers. I bought a small apartment in Prague, the city, where I'd first proven myself, before everything fell apart, and decorated it with photos of my mother and reminders of who I am when no one is trying to define me. I haven't spoken to my father since the trial. He writes me letters from prison sometimes, but I don't read them. Katerina offered to read them for me, to tell me if there was anything important, but I told her no. Whatever he has to say, I don't need to hear it anymore. Because here's what I learned. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about refusing to let someone else's betrayal define you. It's about taking the pain they inflicted and transforming it into purpose. My father tried to bury me, to erase me, to reduce me to nothing. Instead, he freed me from the desperate need for his approval. He showed me exactly who he was, and that revelation, as painful as it was, allowed me to finally become exactly who I wanted to be. Last week, I received a call from a young woman, 23, brilliant, terrified. Her boss at a consulting firm had taken credit for her work and was now trying to force her out. She'd heard about the foundation, about my story. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice shaking. "How do I fight this?" I thought about that conference room, about the manila envelope, about my birthday becoming the day my old life ended. I thought about the months of fear and uncertainty and pain, and I thought about the woman I'd become on the other side of it all. You tell the truth, I said. You document everything. You find people who will listen, and you tell the truth. Not because it will be easy or because you'll definitely win, but because at the end of the day, you need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you didn't compromise who you are. And if the truth isn't enough? She asked. I smiled, thinking of Chen Wei, of Katerina, of all the people who'd stood up when I needed them most. Then you find new people to tell it to. Because the right people, the people worth working for, worth building with, worth trusting, those people value truth more than comfort. And once you find them, you build something so strong that no one can ever take it away from you again. She thanked me, her voice steadier now, and we talked for another hour about strategies and resources and hope. After we hung up, I stood at my window looking out over Prague's ancient streets, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. My father had tried to give me a death certificate for my birthday. Instead, he'd given me something far more valuable, the proof that I didn't need his empire, his approval, or his name to build a life worth living. The best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation, becoming everything they tried to prevent you from being, and doing it so completely that their betrayal becomes nothing more than the catalyst for your greatest triumph. My name is Anfisa Volkov, and I am not my father's daughter anymore. I am my mother's legacy, my own creation, and every single day I choose to be something he could never destroy. Someone who tells the truth, no matter the cost.